Yes, welcome to the current lecture about poultry production. We shall be doing poultry production basically on the part of feeding. Our lecture 3 is about poultry feeding management, and in poultry feeding we shall see various subtopics under. For example, we have feeds, and under feeding we shall be doing the feeding and water requirements for different poultry birds or breeds. For example, the turkey, chicken, goose, ducks, they require different amounts of different nutrients. We shall do about feed resources, about the various feeds. For example, these feeds provide various nutrients, for example, carbohydrates obtained from the corn or grains. We have proteins obtained from either plant source like fish meal, bone meal, or from animal source like the fish meal. We shall look at the feeding equipments, and these feeding equipment include the drinkers. Nowadays we have the automated drinkers, we have sub drinkers or the chick drinkers, which are always plastic. We shall look at the feeders. These are also other feeding equipment where the feeds are always placed. We shall look at the feed distribution within the poultry house, feed weighing and its importance. We shall look at separate sex feeding, whereby different females and males are fed separately. Reason we see, like in breeding, the males always grow faster than the female, so we have to provide them a separate feed, and the female also a separate feed so that they can grow at a uniform stage. Then we later bringing them together for breeding. Shall look at supplementary feeding, and supplementary shall look at like those birds or the poultry birds laid on backyard or free range have to be supplemented with certain feeds depending. For example, shall look at those in free range. They always obtain more of the proteins from the insects, worms, pastures, so you supplement them with the grain to provide them with energy. Then those which are fenced, they always get limited amounts of protein and energy, so we shall have to supplement them with both the grain and the proteins. We shall have to supplement them also with the minerals and then the vitamins. Then we shall look at restricted feeding. Here, like, we minimize or we limit the amount of feeds or nutrients given to the bird for particular purposes. For example, in layers, we don't want them to grow obese since it will affect them during the egg production. Also in the breeders, we don't want them to grow obese, so we shall also limit the feeds. Then in choice feeding, here I'll provide them with the various feeds but separate. For example, we give them the carbohydrates or the energy separate, then provide them with the protein separate. So it's the bird to choose what it wants. The other part we shall talk about the digestive system of the poultry birds, the various organs and then their functions. We shall look at the feed formulation, whereby here it's just quantifying these feeds. Then the other part it will be about the feed mixing. This is about agitation of these feeds. This is the digestive system of a bird, of a poultry or an avian bird. It's composed of various organs, like we see. The first organ is always the beak, which is made up of keratin. These are proteins. So it helps in taking the feeds, always these grains. As the feed is taken, it goes to the esophagus. The esophagus is made up of 4 layers or muscles layers. It plays a role in lubricating this food as it passes to the crop. In the crop, you shall see that the feeds are temporarily stored within the crop that have been ingested. So the ingested feeds or the food will temporarily stain the crop. Then after, as the proventriculus empties, the food moves in the proventriculus to the true stomach. It's glandular, contains enzymes and then hydrochloric acid, which will react upon the ingested food. Food moves into the gizzard, which is also another stomach, but first it is composed of 5 layers and it contains grit. It is mainly important in mechanical digestion. Food moves into the small intestine, whereby here it's mainly absorption of these nutrients, the protein, carbohydrates, fats. You see the liver produces the bile, and this bile plays a role in emulsification of fats. The bile is stored in the gallbladder. The spleen is also there, it's also another organ. Then we have the pancreas that produces the pancreatic juice and then glucagon. Food moves in the small intestine, where its absorption then takes place. Then it goes to the large intestine, whereby here it's mainly the reabsorption of water. Then this food will go to the cloaca for temporal storage, then passed out through the vet. The other organ that we see is the cecum. It's just too blind. It helps in fermentation of the cellulose. For the other side of the physiological part of these avian birds is that they are monogastric, they have a simple stomach, they have no teeth. We see that the beak is modified. Then they contain the egg tooth, especially when they are still young, that helps them to pass through or to break the eggshell during hatching. After it has been hatched, 2 to 3 days, the egg tooth folds off. The birds are omnivorous. Then, these are the different parts that we shall be talking about that make up the digestive system of the bird. You have the beak, esophagus, the crop, proventriculus, the ventriculus, which is sometimes called the gizzard. Then we have the small intestine made up of 3 parts, the duodenum, jejunum, and then the ileum. We have the pancreas, we have the liver, we have the spleen, gallbladder, we have the large intestine, cloaca, and then the cecum. Then here we see the gizzard and then the crop, then the internal layer, how they are thick. Then on the right side we have illustration of how this egg tooth look like. For further reading, there's a video on YouTube you can look at how the digestive system takes place. Different nutrients are required by these poultry birds. For example, we have carbohydrates. These are the main sources of energy. Proteins, these provide amino acids. Then we have the fats. We have water. We have the minerals, and these are required. For example, like in the breeders, they make up 4% of the feed. You have the vitamins, which are either fat soluble or water soluble. Feeding takes 70% of the total production cost. These nutrients are required in different amount by different birds, and depending on the stage of growth. For example, the young ones require maybe specific amount from the older ones. Deficiency in these nutrients results into various conditions. For example, this is slow growth, weak chick, low egg production, and others. Yes, for the case of nutrient requirement of layer chicken, these are chicken birds reared for egg production. The layer chicks are fed on starter feed from day 1 up to 8 weeks, and the ration for the layer chick contains more of the proteins, because the proteins are needed for growth and development. The CP, or the good protein of the layer chick, will contain a CP of 20%. Then still within this meal There must be high ratios of vitamin, nutrients, minerals that are required for the development. We see that as the layer chick develops further, the amount of energy required by the bird reduces. Then from the 8th week to 20th week, the grower chick is fed what we call the grower mash or grower air feed, and this contains a lower percentage of protein, that's always 20% CP. This helps like reduce the protein and then the energy to avoid these birds from growing obese. Remember, as they grow obese, this will affect their egg production in the future. How do we do this? Is through feeding them restricted feeding. Restricted feeding is just like when the birds reach 14 to 20 weeks, you shall have to limit the amount of feed provided to the birds, either the nutrient intake or the feed intake. Reduce them to the level of 100 of 85 to 90% normal, meaning we shall reduce on the amount that we are feeding our birds. Restricted feeding plays two functions: that it avoids fattening of these layer birds, then it prevents production of small sized eggs, especially during the first days of egg production. We shall see that it causes delay in the production of eggs by least 5 to 10 days, and this results into production of some good sized eggs. It contains nutrient feeding reduce the amount of feeds given, then still these growers are provided with the feed containing more calcium. This is 2 to 3 weeks. We increase the amount of calcium from 1% to 3%. Then we shall see that from week 20 to week 73 is now when the egg production starts. Once the egg production starts, we increase the calcium levels, then we feed these birds according to what we call phase feeding, and we have two phases. We have the phase two. Phase one starts from the day we receive the first egg to week 45, and phase two starts from week 46 to week 72. In phase one, these birds require high protein so as to increase the optimum production of eggs, always like 96% egg production. The egg size will increase from 40 grams to 56 or 57 grams. That's the size of the egg. In phase 2, this is when the egg production decreases from 98, 96 below to 80 or 90. Here, once the egg production decreases, we also lower the amount of proteins to 16% crude protein. Then once the egg production decreases still lower, below 70, we shall also lower the CP to 15%. It's like as the bird is growing old, the feed intake increases, but the egg production lowers. This to minimize cost, we also have to reduce the amount of proteins and acids provided to that. After 12 months of egg production, the layer bird undergoes what we call molting, and here we can induce molting to stop the production of eggs for 2 to 3 weeks. This can be through providing them some excess minerals like iodine and zinc, also their deficiency. During choice feeding, this will help the bird to stop. After 2 to 3 weeks, resume back the normal by increasing the daylight. As we increase the daylight, the hens or the layer hen will start to produce the eggs. The eggs that are being produced after molting will not be small, but the rate of egg production will increase. Deficiency of minerals like calcium, zinc, and phosphorus, and vitamin D affects the egg production. So we have to provide them. For example, calcium we provide it through limestone and oyster. There are various organizations that have provided the quantitative requirements of various animal species and breeds. For example, we have basically two. We have what we call the NARC, the National Research Council 1994, then the Bureau of Indian Standards, BIC. It's like of 2007, provides this nutrient requirement quantitative data for these species. Or we shall look at the nutrient requirement of broiler chicken. Broiler chicken, these are birds reared for meat production. They grow faster compared to the layer. It takes 3 to 4 weeks for a broiler bird to attain 1.5 kg and above. Yet the layers they take 20 weeks to attain 1.5 kg if management and feeding is done properly. For the first week, the broilers require high protein, and we provide them with a meal. The starter will always have a higher concentration of good protein, that's always like 23%. Then as the bird, after 2 weeks, the bird develops feathers, so the nutrient requirement decreases. We shall lower the protein 12 to 22% good protein after the 2 weeks. Then the finisher, we shall decrease the good protein still to 20%. Other nutrients required by the broiler, we have calcium, and this is always 1%. Remember, for them, they are not layers. Layers will require more calcium levels to 3%, but the broilers require 1%. Then the total phosphorus level should be 0.7%, but the available one should be 0.45. The salt levels should be 0.5 because excess salt results into salt poisoning, and this affects the bird. It will increase to result into wet litter, and this should favor conditions of coccidiosis. The nutrient requirement for a breeder chicken is that these require more minerals and vitamins, as these affect the hatchability. Different minerals and vitamins like manganese, zinc, iron, and copper. The vitamins like vitamin B6, vitamin BE, these are required by the broiler chicken. Their deficiency will result into the embryo mortality, and this will affect. This is a summary of what we have been talking about with an example of the nutritional requirement data obtained from the Bureau of Indian Standard BIC 2007. Shows the nutrients, then shows the various quantitative accepted data. For example, like moisture in the feed should always not be more than 11%. There are different energy values represented in kilowatts, in kilocalories, and you see as the bird grows, the energy requirement decreases. For example, for broilers, it has been 3,000. For it to have to increase because we require more. For it requires more of the fats, so we increase like the energy. As we increase the energy, being provided from 3,000 to 3,100, 3,200, the excess energy is stored in form of fat, and this is what we require for the broilers. That's why its energy levels increase as it increases. The chicks, for layers, for them they require a high energy level, but as the layer grows, energy level decreases to 2,500 because we don't need them to grow fat. Remember, if we provide them with excess energy, it would be stored as fat. Yet you don't want them to grow obese because it affects the egg production. Still, with the breeder, as the bird grows, we also have to decrease the energy. The good proteins for various poultry breeds has been provided, but you see that the broilers it has a higher CP. When still young, the chick needs more protein. That's 23%. Then in comparison with the layers they require 20%. As they grow old, decrease it to 16, 18, then 16. Then the breeders still the same. Then the other part is about the salts. The salts is generally 0.5 because we have talked about salt poisoning. If we increase the amount of salts, it will decrease the amount of water intake, and the fecal matter would be more watery. This would encourage conditions of wetting, and it causes negative impact. Still with calcium, we shall observe that for broilers it is always 1% throughout. Then for layers it has to increase. At first it's always 1% when it's still a grower, but as it starts laying eggs from the 21st week, 45 shall increase the calcium to 3%. But as the bird gets old, we shall have to increase to 3.5. The amount of phosphorus available should always be 0.545. Then we shall see that even these birds require amino acids, and these different amounts. For example, we have lysine and methionine. Methionine is important in egg production. The next is about the feed presentation types. There are basically 3 types that we have to provide, that we can either provide our feeds, either when they are in mash, and this is always the fine form, but when you feed birds with mash, you shall see that there is a lot of feed wasting. In pellets, you shall see that when we feed our birds with pellet form, the amount of feed waste is reduced. Pellets just that we get the mash, which is the fine feed, we press it. Then crumble is just simply the pelleted feed, but it has now been crushed. Feeding pellet and crumble form, it reduces the feed wastage. You see that there are some factors that affect nutrient requirement of the poultry. For example, we shall look at age. We have seen that the young ones require more proteins than the old ones. We shall look at temperatures. High temperatures affect the feed intake, and this reduces it. Then we shall see that different sex. For example, we have seen like the female and then the layer, the female and then the male require slight differences in nutrients. So you have to consider that. These are the diagrammatic illustrations of the forms of the feeds. For example, we look at A, and the A is the mash. You see that the particles are fine. Then you have the crumble, and then the pellets. This now the pressed mash form. We say the advantage of feeding the birds with crumble and then the pellet is that it reduces wastage. Then the birds will always pick the feeds. The feed formulation and feed mixing. Feed formulation refers to quantifying of these feeds to form a ration. You quantify various feed resources to form a ration based on the nutrient requirement. Then we have feed mixing. Feed mixing is simply agitating of these different feeds to form a uniform ration. Feed mixing has advantages. It makes like a uniform ration, meaning the birds will receive the nutrients. It avoids selective feeding. The different methods that we use in formulating feeds, they are mainly like 4. We have trial and error. This is the common ones, whereby people just mix the feeds. Then by trial and error, the feed will they obtain the ration. We have what we call Pearson. This is simple. It's always best when you're having like 1 to 2. You're having like 1 to 2 different ingredients. So we use a Pearson, but this requires when we know the CP. We can either use algebraic equations to formulate the feeds. Then you have some computer softwares, linear programming that can be used to formulate. Pearson is just a tool that is used to calculate the portion, the two feeds needed. Then for you to use this tool, you must be knowing that you want either one of your feed has higher metabolizable energy or good protein than the other. That's by that you shall be able to calculate. This is sample question. You can try to calculate. Then in the comment section, you can comment the answer, as I have to give the feedback. The feeding equipments, these are basically, we have the feeders, then we have the drinkers. Drinkers, we have the automated drinkers. For example, what you can see here, it's a bell drinker. Then we have a plastic drinker, the plastic feeder, also here. Then you have the wooden feeder. Feeds are provided into the feeders. Then water is provided to the drinkers. As the bird grows or increases in size or height, we have to provide a provision. We also increase the size of either the feeder or the drinker. We see that as the bird is still young, the size will always be at the crop size. And as the bird grows, we shall increase it to the back height. That enables the bird to pick easily the feeds and water. We have what we call sex separate feeding. Here we feed the males and the female birds separately. It enables them to grow uniformly because if we leave them together, the males will either feed more than the females. Then also the male and the female require different in the nutrient requirements. So by doing so, to enable their growth. Supplementary feeding, this is basically in the backyard. We have considered the free range birds have to be supplemented with some nutrients. For example, those of nutrients include like grains. You supplement them with the grains. This can be either done during early morning or late in the evening. Then we have some birds that are being fenced. For them, we have to supplement them with both energy, the proteins, and then the vitamins and then the minerals for their